Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Chat. I'm Teresa Wiedrich, the graduated homeschool mom of four, turned certified life coach for homeschool moms. I help homeschool moms do their homeschool thing and their homeschool mom life confidently and authentically from the inside out. And if we haven't already met, it's lovely to meet you. I would love to hear where you're coming from, who you're homeschooling, what part of the world you're homeschooling. I am in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. I have four kids. Three of them are graduated. My youngest is about to graduate this upcoming year, possibly go into an engineering program. We have yet to be clear on that. And I've got three older kids who've either graduated from programs, have graduated from programs going into new programs, or are living on the other side of the country. It's hard to believe that this is where I'm at in this, as Amber O'Neill Johnston says, this homegrown experience. I wouldn't have imagined that they'd grow up, and everybody said they would, and then they did. And yet I stick around this space because I absolutely love the work that all of you are doing. And I know that it enables freedom and alignment, a deep sense of purpose for us and for our kids. And I want to support you to do that. And today I get to have a special conversation with someone who I love, and I know we all love. Amber O'Neill Johnston is the author of three books, and her most recent book, Homegrown, just arrived last Tuesday, I believe. So I want to invite her to have a conversation with me. And if you'd like to ask, oops. Well, should I keep that? Let's go with that. You know why? Because I'll tell you something. One of the greatest challenges I've had in my homeschool years is, and I didn't set this up because you wouldn't think I would set this up, but it really has been perfectionism and trying to get things just right. And just actually writing a script for a YouTube video today about doing things perfectly, and I really did. I worked really hard at making it perfect. An 8 to 4 kind of school based around a classical homeschooled approach. Really, I'm trying to out private school the private school. 2 decades of trying to overcome perfectionism, so I'll just leave it there. But I welcome Amber to have a conversation with me, and if anybody wants to throw in their thoughts or questions, you're welcome to do that as well. Hey,
Oh,
you'd think I would plan that, but I did not.
oh, that was great. It made me feel like more normal because that's every live I've ever done. Either I have my camera facing the wrong way, or I can't get on, or I can't get the other person on. So it's perfect.
Yeah, and technology, yes. So tell me something. You're doing things the good old-fashioned way when you're writing. You're using pen and paper, and you said often every Saturday morning you're typically writing?
Yeah, so that's been kind of my when I'm working on a book, I like to just get up really early, maybe around 4:30 and write from about 5 a.m. Um on an average day be done by 10 a.m. So I get 5 hours of writing in uninterrupted, but my family barely even misses me. I come home and they're eating pancakes, ready to start the day. Um and sometimes there have been days where I've kept going. Like I've just called my husband and I'm like, I am in such a zone. I think I could knock out like multiple chapters if I stay here. So I've done 5 to 5 before, not often, but it has been a good way for me to still stay completely present as a mom and a wife at home on the days when I need to do that, and just step away and kind of isolate myself to write when the opportunity comes up.
Yeah, yeah. I've been writing since, well, I've been writing since I was 8, but to write while you have kids in the same room, I actually have figured out how to do that. But it means that I really do not hear what's going on around me. I really laser focus in, and they know that if I'm on the keyboard, I'm not available because I'm literally not emotionally, mentally present. So the other day, my son, who is now almost 17, so he's the only one at home, and he said to me, Mom, something, 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 didn't hear it. And then a few minutes later, Mom, did you put the vinegar in your bedroom? And I'm like, okay, that sounded weird. Now I'm fully impressed when he's asking. How long have you been writing? in your, is that right across the lifetime?
So I would not have ever considered myself a writer per se until my first book, A Place to Belong. But I realized I guess I've always been writing. I was blogging for years before that. I still blog like an old lady. I don't know if I'll ever give that up because I enjoy it so much. But uh, I suppose I have always written. I just didn't identify. It wasn't part of my identity. It was just something I did. I didn't really see it as an activity per se.
You know, one of the things that I noticed when I was writing alongside my homeschool, because I would leave every Wednesday night just to like put all of the stuff that was here on paper. So I felt like I had more clarity, less overwhelm. And I really came to Starbucks overwhelmed. And yes, it really was Starbucks. It's not, encouraging Starbucks, but so I would show up there, everything would go on paper, and I felt a little bit more relieved. But over the course of 2 decades, I could actually see the most significant themes of the homeschool mom life, and I put it into a book myself. But then I've come to understand with coaching that they really are the conversation points on repeat. And I'm curious if that's what your experience has been in your unique way of focusing where you focus. You write more, and then you get clearer on what's really going on in maybe the culture around you.
Yeah, I think that sometimes writing gives me clarity. A lot of times it's therapeutic because I want to be able to enter a lot of the conversations that I see online, but I don't always feel like that's a safe way to enter into maybe deeper conversations or things that can become controversial that don't feel that way to me. And so I feel muted a little bit, like not wanting to rock any boats or upset people either by commenting in their post or by posting something that is really raw, maybe for me. And I found that long form writing allows me to like make my whole point so that I can be understood instead of these little like sound bites that can be taken out of context, and also allows my audience to opt in. I mean, social media should do that, but some of everybody's there. But it's like if you went and purchased the book, you have some aspect of yourself that wants to hear what I'm talking about. Or in the case of Homegrown, the latest book, what all of us are saying, you're interested. And so they typically tend to be better listeners and more willing to enter into conversations. So I found that like as a Christian woman, there are limits as to the way that I'm able to communicate with people, just because of like my commitment to pleasing Christ. And so then sometimes people can come with like venom to me, and I'm like, ooh, I can't like snap back the way that I want to. So I can just though write something lovely, long form in a book or a blog post.
Yeah, you can write an entire book in response.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I find the short form content really tricky as a long form writer, or I'm really a one-on-one kind of person. That's where my focus is, or long form writing. So short form is like, okay, how do I think of all these things in sound bites? And in reality, I'm trying to connect with people, so it's not an option. I have to figure out how to do it. But writing long form, that is, it's not just you putting your thoughts on paper. It's you exploring what you really believe about something. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, in your most recent book, what have you come to get a whole lot clearer on?
Mm. So in Homegrown, it's actually a book of 30 essays. And I wrote the intro, the conclusion in one of the essays, and I'm the editor of the book. So I pulled and curated the voices, edited the essays. But I think what I'm really clear on, these 30 people, it's mostly moms, but also we have some essays from dads. And they are all different people. They're in different age groups, different cultural backgrounds, different geographies. Some have big families, some have one child, some live in the city, some live on big homesteads. Like they couldn't be a more varied group. That was intentional. But at the same time, there's this connective thread that runs through all of the essays, and that is this fiercely intentional commitment to their family culture and their desire to craft something truly lovely with their children, something unique, something personal. And so I think to me, what I've realized through this project is that as different as we all may be, we actually do have not just something, but a critical something in common that ties us all together and allows us to understand bits, if not all, of each other's stories. And I think that there's just a lot of beauty in a situation where in in times where we're all being pulled apart, it almost seems like, and pitted against one another, to be able to work on a project where we're all putting our foot in the circle and, holding hands it feels really good in
That's
this time.
Yeah, in my experience, I've got my own homeschooling experience, but when I'm walking alongside other women, because it's almost always women, my experience is that they are very different, and it's right across the spectrum, as you said, religions, but also across the literal world, the countries in the world, and then of course how they frame life, and sometimes how they even believe about education, what they really believe about it. But it doesn't matter what it is. The common denominator is everybody genuinely cares for their kids. They want the best for their kids, and they're going about with a lot of chutzpah and a lot of inner resource to determine to do it no matter what. And it's not an easy journey, but there's a seed inside of everyone that says I can do this, and that's what I see as the common denominator, and I want to equip or enable that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've often said that it doesn't matter who someone is, what do we think, whatever. If I find out that they're a mother, I almost always can find something to connect with them on. Like we can sit down and have coffee, and we don't even have to like each other, but I feel like there is this connective thread that allows us to at least understand each other on that very base level, and we can kind of go from there. But it's been a good realization for me.
Are there certain, actually, I was going to ask you, are there certain things that you saw as common denominators in the essays that were provided in the book? So maybe I know you can do it. But one of them is that question. And then the other one is when you're looking at each of the people's writings, is there something that you see is not a common thing, or it is not necessarily opposing, but
Mm-hmm.
the
Sure. I think one thing that is common throughout so many of the essays is this idea of relationship and how core relationships are. So the relationship between the parents and the children, but some of the best essays in the book are talking about other relationships, the relationships the family forms with their community, with extended family, with other families that are similar and different, relationships at their co-ops or whatever activity, relationships they're forming with nature, and creation and all of that. So I think there is this strain that goes through all of the essays that deal with the value of relationships, which I think is funny because this book says that homeschooling is relational, is what I'm pulling out of everything. And if you ask for a stereotype of people who are unfamiliar with homeschooling, the one thing that they attack first is the lack of relationships. And I'm like, wow, this is really funny. So that's one of the things. One of the things I think is different in all of them. People enter into homeschooling and experience that in vastly different ways. The reasons people have started homeschooling are so extraordinarily varied, and we have to really remember that because we can tend to be. I love my homeschooling community, but we can be a judgmental bunch, man. It's kind of like we expect that everyone is here for the same reasons we're here, and we expect for everyone to think of things and to see things the same way that we do, or maybe even the way we do alongside all of our friends. And so I think that it gave me a vision, these different essays, as to just how varied people's whys are, why they started and why they're still doing it, or maybe why they're not anymore. And I feel like that helps us to maintain humility when we're talking to people.
traveling was a really big impetus for me to search for the common denominator between me and another person. understanding that at core, even if we didn't see the world the same way, or we wouldn't educate our kids the same way in our homes, we really did have some similarities. And it wasn't necessarily always the same thing, but we could always find it. And traveling really taught me that. Going into the developing world, I was so taught there, and in some ways, truly wish I could stay there because it was so communal and so differently connected. But also just moving from community to community. I started in a very traditional homeschool community and I moved into a very not traditional homeschool community, and realizing that no matter how people were doing it, they wanted the best for their kids. And I could always relate on that connection piece.
Yeah, I think when you talk about travel, it's funny because it's been very formative for me as well. We're actually getting ready to head out on another trip, but I, I aside from impacting the way that I educate my children or our family life, it has impacted me as a woman as well, in giving me confidence in areas where I didn't even realize I needed it. So, for example, all of the places we visited, 100% of them, children have been seen as this like really special gift and welcomed into really all areas of community. And, I find myself, I'm coming back to the United States, like, this was when my kids were younger. After we're traveling, I'm like, I'm not going to get a babysitter every time I have to leave this house to go somewhere. And I started bringing my kids with me. They were quiet. They're sitting next to me. They're not bothering anybody. So unless just their very presence is like burning a hole in your eyes, then accept it, because I'm a woman of childbearing years, and everywhere else in the world, this seems to be okay, except here. And so I realized that when you have a vision, I also saw a vision of women helping each other in the house. And I was like, that is not something I ever see. Who goes over to their friend's house and like helps them clean? That's just not typically what we do. And I saw that in some of the places we visited. And I was like, oh, I'm trying to bring that back. Like I'll come to your house today and keep your kids busy outside while you're cleaning, or come help you do your laundry, you do mine tomorrow, or whatever. And this idea of, I guess, Charlotte Mason calls it a fierce individualism that she saw during her time that I still see today, and travel has helped me break from that at least a little bit. I still am who I am, but at least a little bit.
That's beautiful. I really like that vision. I mean, I also see this. So, without going into details, one of my girls is dating somebody from a different country, and I'm introduced to the idea again that it's unusual in our culture to not have house help or not have people working alongside us. And I've had friends from South Africa. And I remember one gal coming in and saying, "You do this entire house by yourself? Like you clean and you look after your four kids all by yourself." We have an interesting way of framing, just like you said, that individualism. And I think at core, the most important thing it does is keeps us feeling isolated instead of needing each other. And I know from experience, even saying some of the things that I do about homeschooling, which is a beautiful life and is filled with loads of memories, and it's so useful for our kids and ourselves to create a real deep sense of purpose. It also can be a very isolating thing if we're not joining arms with other people.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And that's been hard for me and good for me. Like the traveling somewhere and having house help, it's revolutionary because I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know this was like a thing like this, but this is like changing the whole cadence of my family's life. The way that we move within the house and outside of the house, and the level of attention and attentiveness I can have to the child at hand, that are the kids that are right before me. At the same time, I struggle with it because I feel like it is, there's something, I don't know, I don't feel like we're operating on equal footing. And it's almost like this person's serving me and I'm not paying them that much, but that's what they're used to getting paid. So it's fine, but it doesn't feel fine to me. And so it's like a struggle. And I know that sometimes I've been places and other people that I've met there have been like, okay, you are causing a problem because the house helpers talk to each other, and they're realizing that the people at your house are getting a much better or different experience, and we're not able to do that same thing. And I'm like, sorry, or whatever, but I understand. I don't know, it's very complicated. I appreciate the help, but I prefer to work alongside them rather than me not working while they're doing it for me.
I am totally with you. And then sometimes when people would come later than I was used to, I'm like, I can't leave it till 10.
Yeah. That's funny.
Problem now. What are some of the other observations that you notice from some of the other writers in your book?
I noticed a willingness to be vulnerable. And, we are often put in a position of having to defend homeschooling, and I understand why. I've done that many times myself. But the truth of the matter is that there are pros and cons to every every educational choice. And homeschooling is not always just like this romp through the daisy fields and sunflowers that are falling from the sky, glistening in front of our faces as we have ice cream with cherries on top. And I feel like a lot of times we don't necessarily get to hear a vulnerable, authentic, and honest view of hard times, because what we will get are cynical comments, oh, yes, I'm having a terrible day. I put the kids on the school bus. So you're not going to see that in Homegrown. What you're going to see is someone to say, I am struggling, or I have had these struggles, these life struggles as a homeschooler. Like, it doesn't make me immune to what life is coming, to the valleys that we all experience. Everything's not a mountaintop. And so because it's a longer form writing, like we were just talking about, they're able to explore that more in depth. And I think readers will be really encouraged by this idea that homeschooling is not the key to a blissful life. It's a decision that we make, and we've crafted good lives that we hope that we are all enjoying and look forward to. But stormy days do come regardless.
Really didn't think they did. And I'm not actually joking. I really thought homeschooling was the way to capture my charm to life. That is the my website when I first started homeschooling. And I haven't changed it because I think at core that's often what we really want. And we want it to be all that blissful with the sunflowers, and that was certainly my vision. And then quickly life creeps in, and also my lack of patience or lack of emotional regulation, my children fighting over the front seat or the back seat, that somebody forgot where the soccer cleats are, that that I'm trying to pack in too many activities into a day. So many possible reasons. And yet it is really beautiful. Now that I'm on the other side of it, I see how it creates so much potential harmony and cohesion just in your family of creation. And and really, you are fully embracing life because you are following all those curiosities, and you're enabling kids to move from one curiosity to the next and introducing them to all sorts of worlds. And then they make little choices in their lives, become independent, and then they continue to move in intention throughout their entire life. And it is a beautiful thing and complicated because there's a lot required or is required of you.
Yeah, there's actually one of the essays, the writer talks about this idea that at the worst of times in her life, homeschooling was a salve. It was a good thing because they were able to be together as a family and to hold each other and lift each other up, even as they were kind of walking through this storm. So I think that's another idea. That's something that I've appreciated as well. I had back to back in my family over the last 2 years. My sister was diagnosed with cancer, and literally like less than 3 months after, she finished her year-long treatment, my mom was diagnosed. And so my kids know, like, you know, chemo is where it's at today. Radiation 30 days in a row is what we're doing. We're giving rides, we're fixing food, we're caring for the people that we love. And they've been right there changing drains and doing all this stuff alongside me. And I think that that's something that they would not have been able to do to that fullness. And it's not something fun. It's not something I am happy about or look forward to, but it happened. And I appreciate that, you know, my kids were there for it, and that we could do it together. So I think that there's a lot of value to that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The interesting thing, I had my kids in a private Christian school in the first few years before I discovered that homeschooling was a thing. And my oldest, I remember my oldest was finishing up a science class in grade 2. That's when she finished. And then I had to bring my other 3 kids into the classroom because I couldn't leave them at home. And they were little. And one of them's a baby on my lap, one's a preschooler on my lap, but they weren't supposed to be there in that classroom. As you were saying earlier, there's very compartmentalized element of culture, even in school, that we shouldn't kids. And we had to do mandatory volunteering, but could only do it with our child that was in school. Well, what am I supposed to do with the other 3? So my son went to kindergarten for the only day of his life, and when he was like 8 months or maybe younger, and I remember just thinking that this is like compartmentalizing our family experience, that there's no way that I just show up for one child when I have 4 kids. And I think that's also what we experience when hard things happen within family, is that our kids are so satellited in their own worlds, in a schooled world, that they don't have the capacity to really see what's going on in all of our family life.
Yeah, I see that. And it is something, it's a different way of viewing family.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is like a very small example, but my kids were all at a program and they called me on my phone to tell me my youngest was, you know, having a rough time or whatever. He was sad or crying. I don't even remember. And they were like, you know, do you want to come up here? And I'm like, well, did you take him to his sisters or his brother or anything? And they were like, no. I was like, could you try that first? Because he has like a whole bunch of family members, like about 10 feet outside the door, that I'm really sure could probably make this problem go away in about 30 seconds. I was like, sounds to me like he needs a hug. I was like, he has 3 older siblings right there. And so they did that. They called me back. They're like, yeah, it worked. He's off playing. Everything's great. And it just occurred to me that, like, it's not a big deal. I don't judge them for it. But this thought that a child who is struggling, they don't even see that the family unit is a comforting unit for children to exist in, and that sometimes siblings can be as much of a, you know, balm as a parent or whatever. That, and the fact that I was on a date with my man. So I was like, this is why I'm at the restaurant with my husband. You got to get them kids to work it out.
Love that. That's so good. Well, good for you. Boundaries there. Yeah, there's something that actually what I see is that you are creating, even though it does not feel like this from day to day, when kids are arguing or bickering, or there seems to be always an issue with that one, with these kids. Um, there's a lot of potential bickering and trouble when they're at home that you need to navigate, but you're actually enabling them to learn how to communicate and connect with each other. And though it some days feels very saturating, also when they grow up, then they call each other. I mean, I
Yeah.
literally watched that this morning and I was like, oh, I love that. Also, what's going on?
Yeah, I know I think it's great. And I have siblings, but there's such a big age difference that I didn't grow up with them. So they've always, to my earliest memory, they've always lived outside the house. And we're all very close, but it's quite different because we never bickered. So then I'm like, oh, I'm going to have all these kids. They're going to have siblings. It's going to be so great. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And why didn't anybody tell me? I mean, it's absolutely, some days it is like next level. Um, and at the same time, even then, you know, I have to try to pull some silver lining out of it to keep myself from going mad. But I see that even though it needs refinement and help, a lot of times the siblings are telling each other the truth. This sibling is telling you about yourself. And actually, that's pretty dead on. And I think what a gift in terms of your character refinement that you have someone in your life who loves you enough and feels comfortable enough with you to give you that truth about your behavior or about what you're doing or how you're coming across to other people. Because most of us don't ever get that in any other kind of way because we're being so polite and we have to do this, and so we get away with maybe poor behavior or hurtful things longer than we ought. And so I see my kids, and sometimes I just act like I didn't hear it because I'm like, oh, she brought that. That was a good point. You know what I'm saying? She could have said it more tactfully, but it's out there now. You're going to have to deal with it. So I think there's a lot of, it's not, I would prefer not to hear them bicker for sure, but I do appreciate that the kids help refine each other's character as much as I feel like my husband and I do.
A bane of my existence. That was literally the hardest thing, is listening to the sibling bickering. And of course, I use a lot of tools. The one that I loved the most was Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Um, a lot of other people refer to it differently as well, but I think there's ways to tackle it, just also to know that it's not going to disappear if you're going to be with your kids all the time. It's kind of like this notion that I had early in homeschooling, that everything would be organized and tidy because I was home, and it was
Mhm.
exactly the opposite.
Yeah. No, that's definitely not the case at all. Oh my gosh, no. And it's funny, I had this conference session I did last month, and it was about moms and, caring for yourself during homeschooling. Not so much like bubble bath caring for yourself, but also your mental health, your emotional health, and things like that. And, we talked about the house, and I was like, it's a lot of it has to do with expectation and disappointment, and there's this balance, right? Because on one hand, we're like telling each other, oh, just relax, it's going to be fine, your house is not going to be super clean, you're homeschooling, you're home all day, and those things are true. But also, the state of a friend's house has also been multiple times the first cue I had that she needs help. Not just house cleaning help, but she needs therapy or something. She's drowning and overwhelming. It's not just that the house is messy, it's that they're living in a state that is not healthy, right? So I think that there's so much like on the spectrum that we can get from the state of our house. But at the very light end of it, I'm like, oh, it's gonna have some messiness because this is our school, it's an art studio, it's a poetry cafe, it's a history center, it's a museum, it's a library, and because of all that living that's happening there, it's not going to look like, a magazine might.
No, it will not. And at least in my experience, I mean, I was actually really tidy. But for at the end of my journey here, now that I'm in the perimenopausal years, I actually care so little about perfection. And I wish I had that level of energy way back when. But I actually think it's sometimes a reflection of how out of control things feel at certain times. And when we try to control everything within our home, or keep the clutter at bay, or put everything away, have things perfectly tidy, it's actually a reflection also on the other end of the spectrum of trying to hold things too tightly. And so
Mm,
it's, yeah, kind of both, depends on where you're at.
that's good. That's really good.
But the thing that I was just thinking when you were sharing about that session, that is the work that I do working with women, is to help them to address the things that are not quite feeling right in here, to help them move into an aligned space. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. I see many different reasons, but also common denominators, a lot of, amongst a lot of moms. The concept of self-care, when people speak about self-care not being selfish, I'm like, you can claim that self-care is selfish when you are no longer a human being that also has human needs. And
Mm,
thing is, as moms, we're absorbing all the emotional energy around us, we're absorbing all the responsibilities, the invisible load of being a woman, not just a mother, but that invisible load is so heavy that we need to actually look at those things before we start asking, when is our next pedicure?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you. I've often said, I haven't seen, well, I'll just put it in the affirmative. The biggest reason I've seen for families that are unable to continue homeschooling, not those who choose actively to change, but who are unable, it's usually the overwhelm of the mom. You know what I mean? She's drowning. And we don't talk a lot about that because we're usually so busy defending, oh my gosh, this is such a great thing to do, da, 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 da. And we don't necessarily have a lot of those supports. So I think like the work that you do and a few others, I think it's so important because you understand. I think another reason a lot of times homeschool moms are afraid to really talk about what's happening a lot or to ask for help, it's because a lot of people who don't understand, they'll be like, well, just put the kids in school. Like, why are you doing that to yourself? Or it's almost like when I was struggling with my first baby to nurse and her latching, and it was just super painful and it was blood. It was just really bad. And everybody was like, just give her a bottle of formula. Of course, there's nothing wrong with giving a bottle of formula. There's nothing wrong with going to school, but that's not what I wanted. And so then I felt like I had to suffer in silence because nobody would understand. They weren't helping me do what I knew was right for my baby, but they were instead telling me to do something else. So with homeschooling, we're so afraid that someone will be like, well, if you're so overwhelmed and you can't handle it, just put the kids in school. What's the big deal? When really you're looking for a different solution, you're looking for someone who understands, who can really talk you through some things. And I think that's a great perspective that you bring.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love it. And also, exactly, I hear people say that all the time that they come hang out with me because someone, a therapist or a coach or somebody had said to them, why don't you just put them in school? And the reality is, if you're having a challenge with a kiddo in home, um, it's not disappearing because they go to school. In fact, it might get compounded. There might be more factors that make it even more challenging. So, really, exactly what you said, that overwhelm is the thing that we need to tackle. That's the self care, is addressing the overwhelm. So, I'm glad you got to talk about that. Uh, so, where do we find your book? Are you doing any more celebrations after this? I think it was released last Tuesday.
Yeah, well, I had another book that came out in January, so it's been a celebratory year. But they can find the book at homegrown-book.com, or all of my books are at heritagemom.com. And I think it's a different type of book. There isn't anything else out there like that, which is something I feel really proud to be able to say about all three of my books. They're all unique and kind of one of a kind. But I think for someone anywhere in the homeschooling journey, thinking about homeschooling, thinking about why did I decide to do this in the first place, and anything else in between, even people at the end of their journey, because there are essays that by grandmothers in the book who are on the other side of it and reflecting back. I think that all of those people would enjoy the book, and I certainly enjoyed editing it. I mean, I laughed, I cried, it definitely ministered to me and to where I am in my journey. So yeah, that's it. And I'm on Instagram, obviously. They're looking at it now. Heritage Mom blog, same with Facebook, and heritagemom.com is like my home for everything.
So, from this book, can you, in a nutshell, use a phrase or two that could encourage homeschool moms as they move into their new homeschool year, whether they're new homeschoolers or they've been doing this for a couple decades?
That you are a huge part of the curriculum, you yourself, and the atmosphere that is you. You have like a little aura all around. You bring a certain thing into your house, and that has to be considered as much as math and science and history and which books you pick and all of that. The curriculum of you. What are you bringing, and what are you offering, and what are you receiving, and how is that going to work in with your family and your children? So you have to be part of that equation in some way. You will be, whether you think about it or not, but I would suggest thinking about it and proactively making that choice.
You, mom, are the curriculum. I love it. I hear a new book. It was such a pleasure to spend time with you as always. And to everybody that is joining us here, you'll actually find the replay on Instagram, but I'll also throw it on my YouTube channel and by the end of the week. But if anybody wants to be, encouraged or really get clear on how to do their homeschool year in an aligned way this next really 6 months, 9 months, their full year, whatever, you're welcome to join me for an aligned homeschool reset session and to get clear on what's really going on. But thank you again, Amber. I appreciate having a conversation with you. And
Mm. Thank you. Talk to you later.
we'll